The lie didn't wait for dessert. It was dropped casually, confidently, right in the middle of Christmas dinner, in front of the entire family, like it was some kind of holiday tradition. Alyssa, froze mid-bite. The turkey suddenly tasted like ash, the cranberry sauce like sand. Every smile around the table felt fake. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. We were all gathered in my childhood home, grandparents at the head, aunts and uncles lining the sides, cousins squeezed in wherever they could fit. The house smelled of pine, roast turkey, and something I couldn't name, the faint tang of betrayal. It was supposed to be perfect. But perfect is a lie, isn't it? Across from me sat my older brother, Ethan. Calm. Silent. Responsible. The golden child, my parents always said, though I secretly thought he didn't deserve the title. Growing up, he followed rules while I chased dreams. He listened, I questioned. He obeyed, I rebelled. But tonight, he seemed uneasy. My father cleared his throat and stood, glass in hand. That sound always meant a big announcement. Everyone's heads turned, forks paused mid-air, and even the faint Christmas carols from the living room seemed to hush. Before we move on to dessert, my father began, smiling like he had a secret, "Your mother and I want to share something." My mother's hand rested on his arm, eyes glistening like they had rehearsed tears. "It's been a challenging year," she added softly. "But families make sacrifices. Especially for their children." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "As you all know," my father continued, "Ethan has been managing some unexpected financial troubles. Living independently isn't easy." I blinked. Ethan looked away, his lips tight. My stomach twisted. I had always been the one who struggled abroad, trying to make my way in the world while they called Ethan stable and responsible. Yet tonight, it seemed they were painting him as the victim. "So, we decided to step in," my mother said gently. "Because that's what parents do." Heads nodded around the table. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Someone said, "That's so thoughtful," while a few relatives smiled knowingly, unaware of the storm brewing silently beside them. Then came the dagger. "We even had to move money around," my father said, eyes flicking briefly toward me, money that was originally set aside for future plans. My heart dropped. Future plans. That sounded familiar. The account, my mother quickly added, wasn't being used anyway. It was my account. My name on that account. My future savings. The one they promised would help me with university, travel, even a first home someday. And they had just reassigned it? I looked across at Ethan. He didn't meet my eyes. My parents smiled like they were angels performing a miracle. "Of course, Alyssa understands," my mother said sweetly. "She's always been so mature." Every head turned toward me. Every face waited. Expectation pressed against my chest. I forced a smile, nodding politely, though the world inside me had collapsed. "Let's not make this heavy," my father laughed lightly. "It's Christmas." The clinking of plates resumed. Conversations picked up. Someone poured wine. Someone joked about dessert. The lie settled into the room like it belonged there. Ethan still didn't look at me. I forced myself to eat, though nothing tasted right. Every word they said felt like sandpaper against my mind. Money that was originally set aside. Taken. Reassigned. My plans erased. Later, as relatives moved into the living room for gifts and cake, I lingered by the window, staring into the dark. My parents laughed with others, retelling the story, adding details, polishing it. Each version painted them as noble, and Ethan as struggling. And me? Silent. Ignored. I caught Ethan's eye once. He looked away instantly. When the house finally emptied, I found my mother in the kitchen. "What did you mean?" I asked softly, "about the account?" She didn't flinch. Didn't lie. Didn't fluster. "Oh, Alyssa," she said, sighing, "don't start tonight." It was family money. It was in my name, I said, voice tight. Names don't matter in families, she shrugged. Something snapped inside me, not anger. Not yet. Something sharper. Colder. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, the one I'd grown up in. The bed was still neat, faint holes in the wall from old posters. Everything looked the same, unchanged. Except me. At midnight, I pulled out my phone. I searched for the number my father always bragged about. The bank. The manager. The one place my future was supposedly safe. I didn't call that night. But staring at the screen, I realized one thing. If my parents could lie so easily in front of the whole family, then the truth, whatever it was, had been hidden for a long time. And I, Alyssa, was finally ready to uncover it. The next morning, the house was quiet, but the unease from last night lingered like smoke. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, replaying every word from dinner. My parents' smiles. Ethan's silence. The way they called the account family money. My stomach churned. Something didn't add up. The first red flag came subtly. My mother had promised to help me organize a small savings plan for my upcoming UK trip, yet she brushed me off when I asked about it. "We'll talk later," she said, glancing at Ethan with a warmth she hadn't spared me in years. Ethan, of course, got the extra attention, plans whispered, tips shared, casual nudges toward what's best for him. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt a squeeze of frustration. Later that day, I overheard a phone call. My father, leaning over the hallway railing, spoke in a hushed tone, his voice low but urgent. "Yes. I transferred it today, everything is fine, don't worry about Alyssa." I froze. Transferred? My name hitched in their secret conversation like I was a problem to be managed rather than a daughter to be protected. It wasn't just money. Subtle favoritism showed in small, almost invisible ways. Ethan received invitations to events I wasn't even told about. Extra allowance, promises of trips, advice whispered in private. Every time I questioned it, I was met with a polite smile and a reminder that I was mature enough to understand. But understanding didn't make the sting any less sharp. Even at home, the lies continued. My father praised Ethan for achievements he barely mentioned in passing, achievements he already knew I had surpassed in my own way. I was left feeling invisible, yet expected to appear grateful for their attention when it came my way. The disparity burned quietly, a slow, persistent ache. By evening, I felt drained. I wandered into my room, shutting the door against the cheerful sounds of my family downstairs. I couldn't shake the image of the bank account statement, or the hidden transfer my father had whispered about. Something was off, and it wasn't just the money. It was the secrecy, the careful way they manipulated appearances, the constant tilt toward Ethan that I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to confront them, demand the truth, but a whisper of doubt held me back. What if I misunderstood? What if I overreacted? Every instinct told me something was wrong, yet fear of being dismissed kept me silent. Still, my resolve was growing. The unease had planted a seed, one I couldn't ignore. I had always trusted my parents, even when they favored Ethan. But now, every conversation, every glance, every carefully chosen word made me wonder, how long had this been happening? And how much of my life had been quietly redirected away from me, without my knowledge? As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that this wasn't just a family quirk. It was a warning. A signal that the trust one had placed in them, and even in my own brother, might be built on carefully constructed lies. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew, I had to find out exactly what was hidden before it was too late. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the hushed phone call I had overheard. Transferred, everything is fine, don't worry about Alyssa. My heart pounded as I pulled out my laptop and logged into my online banking app. I froze. The account balance was gone. Every penny I had saved over the years, the account my parents had promised was mine, my safety net for years of hard work abroad, was no longer there. In its place was a note from the bank, account closed per request of account holder's authorized representative. I stared at it, disbelieving. My parents' faces flashed in my mind, smiling, proud, calling me mature as if I were already complicit in this theft. And Ethan, my brother, my own flesh and blood, had known nothing yet had been subtly favored all along. Rage flared in my chest. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the transaction history. Every last deposit, painstakingly saved from part-time jobs, freelancing, and side projects, had been moved, diverted to a different account under their control. My future had been stolen right in front of me. I felt my stomach twist into knots. I wanted to scream, to confront them immediately, but shock held me frozen. Heartbreak burned through me first, a deep, aching disappointment. I had trusted them completely, believed their words, and they had betrayed me without a second thought. Then came disbelief. How could they justify this? Parents, the people who were supposed to protect you, had systematically stripped me of everything I'd worked for. And in front of the entire family, no less, with all the smiles and cheers masking their deceit. I sank into my chair, trying to breathe, my mind racing. Questions tumbled over one another. Was Ethan involved? Was he just another pawn? Could I ever trust anything they said again? Every memory of their favoritism, every small dismissal, every whispered "don't worry," Alyssa now felt like part of a carefully constructed lie. The weight of their betrayal settled over me, heavy and suffocating. But beneath the heartbreak, beneath the disbelief, something else began to grow, something sharp and deliberate. Rage, yes, but controlled. Calculating. They had underestimated me, thinking I would simply accept their theft, swallow my disappointment, and remain silent. I clenched my fists. My mind started plotting. I didn't yet know the exact steps, but one thing was clear: I couldn't let this go. Not now. Not ever. The suspense, the uncertainty of what I would do next, electrified me. I had to find out exactly how deep their deception ran, and I knew just where to start. The bank manager. The person who could confirm every hidden transfer, every fraudulent move. And as I stared at the empty account balance, a cold resolve settled over me. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was war. The emptiness of my bank account sat in the back of my mind like a constant, gnawing echo. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' smiling faces at Christmas dinner, their voices praising Ethan, their hands brushing mine with the gentlest warmth as if to say, "Don't worry, Alyssa, we're taking care of it for you." But the truth was brutal, undeniable. They had stolen from me. Taken my future. Manipulated the very foundation of trust that I had built my life on. I wandered to the living room in the quiet hours of the night. The house smelled faintly of pine and leftover desserts. I sank into the couch, staring at the muted glow of the Christmas lights. Memories of my childhood flashed before me, the times I had worked extra hours to save for school trips, the long nights freelancing just to have a cushion, and the countless conversations with my parents about responsibility and planning ahead. And now? All gone. My life, meticulously planned, had been redirected into someone else's hands. For hours, I sat there in silence, letting the heartbreak wash over me. Then, slowly, like a tide turning, grief began to harden into something else. Sharp. Precise. It wasn't just sadness anymore, it was clarity. A single thought formed, crisp and undeniable: I will not be silenced. I will not be erased. The first spark came unexpectedly. I found an old photo album tucked away on the bookshelf. Pictures of me as a child, smiling at school performances, holding certificates, hugging my parents after every achievement. I turned each page with trembling fingers until I reached the most recent family gathering, Ethan grinning in front of a backdrop of expensive gifts, me standing quietly, unnoticed, while my parents cooed over him. My chest tightened. That was the moment I realized the depth of their favoritism, the way it had been allowed to fester for years. I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This had been deliberate. Tears came, hot and unbidden, but I welcomed them. Because after crying came a strange, liberating sensation, a seed of courage I hadn't felt in years. I realized something crucial. I had always measured myself against their expectations, always stayed silent for the sake of peace, always assumed loyalty meant compliance. But loyalty had limits. And mine had been crossed in the most personal, painful way possible. I rose from the couch, pacing the room. My thoughts sharpened. If they had taken my money without my knowledge, if they had twisted the story for the entire family to admire Ethan and belittle me, then it wasn't just about funds. It was about control. About power. And they had underestimated me. I remembered the bank manager's number I had saved days earlier. The one I had stared at after Christmas dinner. My pulse quickened. The first step toward reclaiming what was mine was there, waiting. Not a confrontation yet, not a shouting match, just facts. Proof. And facts were a language my parents could not manipulate. I opened my laptop and drafted a mental plan. I would speak to the bank manager, confirm every transfer, every authorization, every false statement. I would document it all. I would prepare. And then, I would confront them, not with emotion alone, but with unassailable truth. The more I thought, the more the fear of inaction dissolved. My parents had played their hand, and now it was my turn. But this time, I would not be naive. I would not allow guilt, politeness, or fear to blind me. I would fight with focus, strategy, and precision. By morning, I was transformed. Gone was the quiet, hesitant Alyssa who swallowed disappointment. In her place was someone sharper, more alert, ready to reclaim everything that had been stolen. The heartbreak had refined me, tempered me. I wasn't just hurt, I was determined. I practiced my resolve silently. They lied. They stole. They underestimated me. Not again. Each repetition was a promise to myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The emotional strain of confronting family betrayal could crack even the strongest person. But I was stronger now, and for the first time, I felt that unshakable certainty. I could and would fight back. And somewhere deep inside, a thrilling anticipation bubbled. Not just revenge, but justice. Not just restitution, but recognition. I was no longer their quiet, obedient daughter. I was Alyssa, and I would make them see that betrayal had consequences. The first move would come soon. My heart raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The bank manager awaited. And with him, the truth. This was my turning point. The moment when heartbreak became action, despair became strategy, and betrayal became the spark that ignited my inner strength. I was ready, by the time I stepped out of the house that morning, I wasn't shaking anymore. That scared me more than the anger had. The cold air cleared my head as I walked, phone in my hand, fingers wrapped tightly around it like an anchor. I didn't rush. I didn't storm off. That would have been the old Alyssa, emotional, reactive, easy to dismiss. Instead, I moved with intention. If my parents had taken my money quietly, then I would reclaim the truth quietly too. Step by step. The first step was information. I didn't call the bank manager yet. I resisted the urge deliberately. Instead, I reviewed everything I already had access to: emails, old messages, screenshots of past conversations where my parents reassured me the account was untouched. Safe. Growing. For your future. Each promise now read like evidence. I created a folder on my laptop. Dated everything. Backed it up twice. If this turned ugly, and I knew it would, I wanted facts, not feelings. The second step was observation. Back home, I became invisible on purpose. At dinner, I smiled. I listened. I asked harmless questions. I watched my parents carefully, noticing things I'd ignored my entire life. The way my mother redirected conversations when money came up. The way my father avoided eye contact whenever I mentioned the future. The subtle glances they exchanged, silent communication, practiced and efficient. They thought the danger had passed. That was their mistake. Ethan played his role too. Still quiet. Still distant. Still benefiting from decisions he pretended not to notice. I couldn't tell if he was complicit or just weak. Either way, he wasn't innocent. A few days later, I set the third step in motion. The trap. I casually mentioned over breakfast that I might need a small amount from my old savings for a short course abroad. My mother froze for half a second. "Oh," she said, too lightly. "Why rush into that?" My father chimed in quickly. "We should talk about finances later. Things are complicated right now." Complicated. There it was. That night, I sent myself a voice memo, recording everything while it was fresh, the hesitation, the deflection, the exact wording. Patterns mattered. Lies always followed patterns. The fourth step was leverage. I reached out to extended family, not to accuse, not to complain, but to ask innocent questions. "Do you remember when Mom and Dad said they opened that account for me?" "Yes." "They mentioned it at Christmas, right?" "Of course." They sounded very confident. Confident liars always do. I documented those conversations too. Quietly. Carefully. The tension in the house grew, though no one spoke about it openly. My parents were relaxed on the surface, but I noticed the cracks. Phone calls taken in private. Whispered conversations stopping when I entered the room. A new defensiveness whenever finances came up. They still believed they were in control. That belief was the only reason my plan would work. The fifth step, the most important one, was timing. I finally scheduled the meeting with the bank manager. Not immediately. Not impulsively. I waited until my parents were comfortable again, until they stopped watching me so closely. Until they assumed I had accepted my place. The appointment confirmation sat quietly in my calendar like a loaded weapon. In the meantime, I rehearsed. Not arguments. Not accusations. Questions. Clear, precise questions that would force answers. Who authorized the transfer? When was the account closed? Under what legal authority? Why wasn't I informed? Questions that couldn't be laughed off at a dinner table. Each night, doubt tried to creep in. They're your parents. What if this destroys the family? What if you're wrong? But then I remembered the empty account balance. The public lie. The way they had smiled while erasing my future. Families don't do that by accident. By the end of the week, the tension became almost unbearable. My parents grew bolder again, planning trips, discussing expenses openly, acting like the worst had passed. I could see it clearly now, they thought silence meant surrender. I let them believe it. On the eve of my meeting with the bank manager, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt grounded. Focused. Dangerous in a quiet way. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was precision. Tomorrow, I would hear the truth from the one place that couldn't lie. And once I had it, everything would change. My parents still believed they held all the power. They didn't know they were standing on the edge of exposure, one step away from losing control of the story they'd carefully constructed. And I was the one holding the final thread. The bank lobby was quiet in the way expensive places always are, polite, hushed, confident that nothing truly bad ever happens there. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted control. When the bank manager finally stepped out to greet me, he wore the practiced smile of someone who believed this would be a routine meeting. He gestured me into his office, glass walls reflecting my calm expression back at me. I noticed how steady my hands were as I sat down. That's when I knew I was ready. "I'm here about an account that was closed without my consent," I said evenly. No drama. No emotion. His smile faltered just slightly. He pulled up records. Typed. Paused. Then his posture changed. The silence stretched. "Ms. Alyssa," he said slowly, "the account was closed under authorization from your parents. Specifically, your father." "I never signed anything," I replied. "And I was the primary account holder." He swallowed. "Yes. That's the problem." He turned the screen toward me. There it was. The signature. Not mine. A forged authorization form. A rushed scan. A legal loophole abused by someone who assumed I'd never look closely. "What happens now?" I asked. He leaned back, exhaling. "Now, everything that happened becomes very difficult for them to explain." That was the moment the movie in my head shifted from slow burn to explosion. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because the evidence wasn't just proof of theft, it was proof of fraud. And fraud doesn't stay a family secret. 2 days later, my parents invited everyone over again. They called it a family meeting. Said they wanted to clear the air after Christmas. Apologies were hinted at. Closure promised. They had no idea I had already rewritten the ending. The living room filled quickly. Grandparents. Aunts. Uncles. Cousins. Even Ethan sat stiffly on the couch, eyes darting like he sensed a storm coming but didn't know from which direction. My mother stood first. "We just want honesty tonight," she said warmly. "Families shouldn't hold grudges." I almost laughed. My father nodded. "If anyone feels hurt, we should talk it through." That was my cue. "I agree," I said, standing. My voice didn't shake. "Honesty is overdue." Every head turned toward me. I went to the bank. The room changed instantly. My father stiffened. My mother's smile froze. I met with the bank manager, I continued calmly. About the account that was closed in my name. My father stood abruptly. "Alyssa, this isn't the time." "Oh, it is," I interrupted. Still calm. Still controlled. "Because I brought documentation." I placed the printed forms on the coffee table. Copies. Highlighted. Impossible to ignore. "Forgery," I said plainly. "Unauthorized transfer. False representation." A gasp rippled through the room. My mother rushed forward. "This is a misunderstanding, the bank doesn't think so," I replied. "They've already flagged the account. An internal investigation is underway." Silence. Thick. Crushing. My father's face drained of color. "And before anyone asks," I added, turning slowly to face the room, "yes, this was the same money you were told at Christmas had been moved around." Eyes shifted. Murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "You said it was family money." My father opened his mouth. Closed it. I turned to Ethan. "Did you know?" I asked. He shook his head slowly, horror dawning on his face. "No. I swear. I didn't know." For the first time, I believed him. Then the final blow. "I've also informed the bank," I said, "that if this isn't resolved immediately, I will pursue legal action." My mother sank onto the couch. My father looked around the room, at the faces that had once admired him, trusted him, believed his stories. And for the first time, he had nowhere to hide. "This wasn't about helping family," I said quietly. "It was about control. And you lost it the moment you assumed I wouldn't fight back." No one defended them. Not one voice. The family meeting ended early. People left in stunned silence. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. My parents stood alone in the wreckage of their own lies. As I walked toward the door, my mother called after me. "Alyssa, we're still your parents." I turned. "And I was still your daughter," I said. "When you stole from me." I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The damage was done. Outside, the air felt lighter. Sharper. Real. They had taken my future quietly. I took back the truth loudly. And that was only the beginning. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It unraveled. Slowly. Publicly. Irreversibly. Within days of that family meeting, the bank froze every account connected to my parents. What they thought would stay hidden behind smiles and holiday speeches was now part of an official investigation. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were postponed. Their confidence, once so effortless, crumbled into panic. The money came back first. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But it came back to the account. It had never belonged anywhere else but mine. Seeing the balance restored didn't make me celebrate. It made me exhale. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt light enough to breathe without pain. My parents tried to reach me. Texts at first. Then calls. Long voicemails full of justifications disguised as apologies. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought it was temporary." Families make mistakes. They never said the one sentence that mattered: "We were wrong." Ethan came next. He showed up at my door one evening, eyes red, voice unsteady. He told me everything he knew, which wasn't much. He'd believed our parents when they said the money issue was handled. He'd trusted them the same way I had. I believed him. But belief didn't mean things went back to how they were. Some bridges can be repaired. Others are better left as lessons. Word spread through the family quickly. The same relatives who nodded approvingly at Christmas dinner now avoided my parents' calls. Invitations dried up. Conversations stopped mid-name. Respect, once lost, doesn't announce its departure, it simply never comes back. My parents became careful people overnight. Careful with words. Careful with money. Careful with stories. And everyone noticed. As for me, something unexpected happened. I stopped shrinking. I moved out quietly. No drama. No speeches. Just one suitcase, one final look at the house that had taught me more about betrayal than love ever had. I found my own place. Small. Bright. Mine. The bank manager followed through on everything he promised. Procedures were tightened. Signatures scrutinized. My case became an internal example, what not to ignore. I didn't need revenge beyond that. Accountability was enough. What surprised me most was the respect. Family members reached out, not with pity, but with admiration. Friends listened differently when I spoke. Even strangers seemed to sense it. I carried myself like someone who knew her worth and would defend it. Because I would. I used part of the recovered money for the course I'd once mentioned casually, the one my parents tried to shut down with deflection and fear. I booked it without asking anyone's permission. No approval needed. No explanation required. On the first day of class, I sat by the window and watched the city move below me. People rushing. Living. Choosing. I smiled. That night, my mother sent one final message. "We hope one day you'll understand why we did what we did." I deleted it. Understanding doesn't mean accepting. And forgiveness doesn't mean access. What they lost wasn't just money. It was authority. Control. The story they'd spent years writing where I was always the quiet, grateful daughter who wouldn't question the ending. They thought lying at Christmas dinner would protect them. Instead, it exposed them. I don't hate my parents. But I don't belong to them anymore either. And that freedom, earned through pain, courage, and truth, is worth more than any account balance ever was. So let me ask you, watching this right now, have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? Have you ever been told to stay quiet for the family? Have you ever had to choose between peace and self-respect? If you have, you're not alone. Tell your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you believe that truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how carefully it's buried, then subscribe. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's walking away with your future intact, while the liars are left explaining their past.